The moment Ethan Vale signed the divorce papers, the whole boardroom applauded. He thought they were celebrating him. After all, Ethan was the golden CEO of Orient International, young, ruthless, impossible to replace. He had just humiliated his quiet wife, Celeste, by ending their marriage days after she gave birth. Also, he could marry his glamorous mistress, Marissa, in front of the same executives who once whispered that Celeste was too ordinary for him. Celeste did not cry. She simply held her newborn son, looked at Ethan's signature, and smiled. That smile should have terrified him. Because Ethan never knew the company he ruled was not his achievement. It was Celeste's inheritance. He never knew the chairman who had personally promoted him was her father, and he never knew the divorce papers he proudly signed were not just divorce papers. They were a trap. Hidden inside the agreement was a morality clause Ethan himself had approved years earlier. Any executive who abandoned a spouse, concealed an affair, and damaged the family trust would lose every share, title, bonus, property benefit, and legal protection tied to the company. Then Marissa laughed. She pointed at Celeste's baby and sneered. At least Ethan won't have to raise that little burden anymore. The room froze. A silver-haired man rose from the head of the table. Billionaires stood. Lawyers opened files. Cameras turned. Ethan's phone began exploding with frozen accounts, revoked access, cancelled contracts, and security alerts. Celeste's father looked at his daughter and asked, "Should I stop?" For the first time, Celeste handed the baby to a nurse, stepped toward the woman who mocked her child, and said softly, "No, let them feel what mercy costs." By sunset, Ethan and Marissa were not lovers anymore. They were evidence in the trial of their lives. Ethan stared at his phone as if the glowing screen had become a foreign object. The notifications kept appearing one after another, each one colder than the last. Access denied. Transaction blocked. Executive credentials suspended. Corporate residence lease terminated. Board voting rights revoked. His thumb hovered over the screen, but he could not make himself touch anything. For the first time since he had entered Orient International's glass tower as a junior strategist with borrowed shoes and a hunger that frightened people, Ethan Vale did not know which command to give. The boardroom he had ruled for 4 years looked different now. The polished black table, the wall of city lights, the silver Orient emblem above the chairman's chair, all of it seemed to belong to another world. Men who used to rise when he entered now avoided his eyes. Women who used to laugh at his sharp jokes now watched him with the tight, careful expressions people wore at funerals. Only Celeste looked unchanged. She stood near the end of the table in a cream-colored dress, her hair pinned loosely at her neck, her newborn son wrapped against her chest. She looked too pale, too recently wounded by childbirth, too gentle to be the reason the room had turned into a battlefield. And yet everyone was waiting for her. "Celeste," Ethan said, and hated how small his voice sounded. She did not answer. Marissa, who had been glowing minutes earlier in a red silk dress and diamonds Ethan had bought with a company-linked expense account, let out a shaky laugh. "This is ridiculous. This is some kind of performance. Ethan, tell them." Ethan wanted to. He wanted to slam his hand on the table, threaten lawsuits, fire someone, call security, call the press, call anyone who would confirm that he was still Ethan Vale, CEO, untouchable, chosen. But 2 security officers were already standing behind him. Not behind Celeste. Behind him. The silver-haired man at the head of the table remained standing. Lysander Morland had spent most of his life avoiding cameras, which was why Ethan had never recognized him beyond the distant title of Chairman Emeritus. He was the kind of man whose wealth did not announce itself with gold watches or loud suits. It sat quietly in the room like gravity. It moved everyone without asking. Lysander looked at Ethan as one might look at a cracked vase that had once been valuable. "You signed the agreement voluntarily," he said. Ethan swallowed. "I signed divorce papers." You signed a corporate dissolution trigger attached to your marital settlement, cross-referenced with the executive morality agreement you authored, reviewed, and enforced against 3 other senior officers. That clause was for scandals, Ethan snapped, for corruption, for public damage. Lysander's face did not change. You used company residences for an affair. You authorized Marissa West's consulting invoices while concealing a personal relationship. You planned to install her in a senior advisory position after marriage. You abandoned your recovering wife and newborn child in a manner that violates the family trust protection you insisted all Orion executives should uphold. Ethan's eyes darted to the lawyers seated along the wall. Their folders were already open. Their pens were already moving. Marissa stepped backward. "No, I didn't know about any clause." "No," Celeste said quietly. "You only knew about the jewelry, the trips, the private flights, and the office you were already measuring for curtains." Marissa's mouth parted. The nurse near the door shifted softly, holding the baby now. Celeste had handed him away only seconds before stepping forward, but Ethan could still hear the child's faint breathing in the silence. It scraped at him in a way he did not understand. He had told himself the baby would be handled later. Support payments, schedules, lawyers, a problem to be managed after the new life began. He had not thought of the baby as a witness. But the child had been there, sleeping, present, carrying his name. Celeste turned to the board. "Proceed." It was not loud. It did not need to be. The first lawyer rose. Effective immediately, Ethan Vale is removed as Chief Executive Officer of Orion International pending civil review and criminal audit into misuse of corporate benefits and undisclosed conflicts of interest. Criminal audit. The word struck Ethan harder than any shout would have. He looked at Celeste, searching for the woman who used to fold his shirts before business trips because she said a wrinkled collar made him look tired. He searched for the woman who had once sat in emergency rooms with him when stress burned holes through his stomach, who had brought him tea at 3 in the morning while he cursed at presentations, who had never once asked him to slow down because she knew speed was the only way he had ever escaped poverty. He found her. That was the worst part. She was still there, quiet, soft-eyed human. But she was no longer reaching for him. Years earlier, long before Orion, Ethan had met Celeste in the rain outside a small university library. He had been 26, furious, broke, and carrying a stack of rejected applications in a folder that had gone soft from water. His shoes were splitting at the soles. His scholarship stipend had been delayed. He had skipped lunch 3 days in a row and told himself hunger sharpened ambition. Celeste had been sitting beneath the stone archway with an old paperback in her lap, eating an apple sliced neatly into quarters from a small glass container. He had hated her immediately for looking peaceful. "You're blocking the dry spot," he had muttered. She looked up. Her eyes were grey, not cold grey, but cloud before rain grey. "There's room. I don't need charity. I offered space, not charity." He had almost walked away, but thunder cracked over the library roof and pride became less useful than shelter. So he sat beside her, dripping rainwater onto the stone, pretending not to notice when she pushed the little container of apple slices between them. He did not take one. Not for 8 minutes. Then he did. She never smiled like she had won. That was the first thing about Celeste that unsettled him. She could give without making a person feel purchased. In Ethan's world, every favor had teeth. Every kindness expected interest. His mother had raised him in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat where the ceiling leaked and the landlord collected rent with a smile sharp enough to cut skin. His father had disappeared when Ethan was 10 after promising to return with groceries. For years, Ethan believed anyone who left a room might never come back. So he learned to be the one who left first. Celeste had not known any of that at the library, but she listened when he spoke. Not with pity. Pity would have ended everything. She listened as if his anger was a language she could translate. "What do you want?" she asked him that afternoon. "To never be ignored again," he said. She tilted her head. That's not a dream, that's a wound wearing a suit. He laughed despite himself. And what do you want? She looked at the rain for a long time before answering. To know who people are when they think I have nothing to give them. He should have remembered that. He should have remembered every word. In the boardroom, Lysander's voice pulled Ethan back to the present. Mr. Vale, you will surrender all company devices. You can't do this, Ethan said. One of the older directors, a woman named Helena Croft, who had once called Ethan the sharpest blade in the building, closed her folder. We already voted. When? Before you entered, she said. The applause. Ethan's stomach turned. They had not been applauding his courage. They had not been celebrating his engagement, his freedom, his next chapter with Marissa. They had applauded because the board had already removed him and his signature had completed the mechanism. He had walked into his own execution smiling. Marissa grabbed his arm. Ethan, do something. Something. He had built his life on doing something. Clawing, forcing, persuading, destroying obstacles before they became walls. But every weapon he knew required power, and power had just changed hands without raising its voice. Celeste turned to leave. Ethan lunged one step forward. Security moved instantly. Celeste, wait. She paused. For one wild second, hope flared in him. She had always waited, even when he forgot anniversaries, even when he missed dinner, even when he took calls during her doctor appointments. Celeste waited in doorways, in restaurants, in quiet bedrooms with a lamp burning on his side of the bed. What do you want? He asked. The question came out rawer than he intended. Celeste looked back at him, and something in her face shifted, not mercy, not cruelty, but memory. When I asked you that in the rain, she said, you told me you wanted to never be ignored again. Ethan froze. You got your wish, she continued. Everyone is looking at you now. Then she walked out. No one followed her except Lysander, the nurse, two attorneys, and the tiny sleeping boy Ethan had been ready to discard as part of a life he considered too small. The doors closed behind them. The silence left in the room was merciless. Marissa began crying first. It was not a quiet cry. It was angry, sharp, humiliated. She spun toward Ethan with mascara gathering beneath her eyes. You said she was nobody. Ethan stared at the closed doors. She never told me. Marissa laughed once, bitterly. How could you not know your wife was Lysander Morland's daughter? Because Celeste had used her mother's surname in public, because she had worn simple dresses and driven a 10-year-old sedan long after Ethan could afford better, because she had said her father was in finance, and Ethan, bored by anything that did not serve him directly, had never asked another question, because she did not post photos, did not attend galas, did not decorate herself with the kind of wealth he understood. Because he had stopped being curious about her once he thought she belonged to him. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Celeste walked slowly because her body still ached. The baby had been born 5 days earlier after 22 hours of labor, most of which Ethan had missed because he claimed an acquisition call could not wait. He had arrived near the end with his shirt collar open and Marissa's perfume clinging faintly to his coat. Celeste had noticed. She had noticed everything for months. Her son Noah made a soft sound in the nurse's arms. Celeste reached for him and the nurse gently returned him. The moment his small weight settled against her, something inside Celeste steadied. It was strange how a person so tiny could become a fortress. Lysander walked beside her without speaking until they reached the private elevator. Only then did he say, "You should have let me stop this at the hospital." Celeste looked down at Noah's face. If you had stopped it there, he would have claimed confusion, pressure, emotion. He would have blamed the birth, blamed Marissa, blamed me. And now he has witnesses. Lysander's expression tightened. Your mother used to say that truth is patient because lies are impatient. Celeste closed her eyes. Her mother had died when Celeste was 16, but sometimes grief ignored time. It arrived fresh, as if it had been waiting around the corner with its hands folded. Evelyn Morland had been everything Lysander was not, warm where he was reserved, open where he was guarded, generous with affection in a house that otherwise ran on protocol. She had taught Celeste to play piano, to choose flowers by scent instead of price, to speak kindly to housekeepers because titles were costumes and character was the body beneath them. But Evelyn had also taught her caution. Never confuse being soft with being unprotected, she had said one winter evening while helping Celeste stitch a torn ribbon back onto a dress. The world loves gentle women until they say no, then it calls them dangerous. Celeste had not understood then. She understood now. The elevator doors opened to the private floor Lysander kept above Orion's executive suites. It had no gold, no obvious luxury, just old wood, soundproof glass, shelves of legal books, and a view of the city that looked like a river of stars. Celeste had spent her childhood running through these halls barefoot, hiding under conference tables while ministers, investors, and foreign bankers argued above her. Her father had never hidden business from her, he only hid her from business. Not because he was ashamed of her, but because the Morland name invited hunger. There had been threats when she was little, men who tried to marry into the family through cousins, executives who sent gifts when she turned 18, journalists who called her the trillion-dollar daughter before she had even chosen a college major. After Evelyn died, Lysander became more protective, then colder, then nearly impossible to reach except through duty. Celeste learned to disappear. She studied under her mother's maiden name. She volunteered in hospitals where no one cared who owned what. She rode buses, cooked simple meals, wore sweaters until the sleeves frayed. She did not hate wealth. She hated the way it made people perform. Then she met Ethan in the rain, and for a while, she believed she had found someone who wanted her before knowing what she was. That belief had cost her more than money ever could. Lysander poured water into a glass and handed it to her. The board is secure. The audit team is already inside his office. Marissa West's accounts are being reviewed. Celeste sat carefully on the sofa, and Ethan. He will rage, then bargain, then accuse, then beg. She almost smiled. You make it sound like weather. It is weather, predictable, destructive, temporary. Noah stirred. Celeste touched his cheek with one finger. Do you hate him? Lysander asked. The question settled between them. Celeste thought of Ethan at 26, soaked and proud beneath the library arch. Ethan at 28, asleep with his head on her kitchen table after staying up all night preparing for an interview he thought he had earned by luck. Ethan at 30, slipping a cheap ring onto her finger with shaking hands, whispering, I don't have much, but everything I become will be ours. Everything I become. She had believed him. No, she said at last, I hate what he chose. Lysander looked away first. It was the closest he came to crying. Downstairs, Ethan was escorted to his office for the last time. The walk felt endless. Employees stared through glass walls. Some pretended not to, others did not bother pretending. By morning, the story would be everywhere inside the company, even if the press release was careful. Corporate towers fed on whispers. Every assistant, analyst, and vice president would know that Ethan Vale had fallen before dinner. His corner office was already occupied by auditors. A young man in a gray suit sat at Ethan's desk, scanning files on the company computer. A woman wearing latex gloves, as if Ethan were contaminated, placed his personal items into clear inventory bags. My belongings, Ethan said. Personal property will be reviewed and returned where appropriate, the woman replied. Where appropriate? She did not look up. Company assets were intermingled. Marissa sat stiffly on the sofa where she had once reclined during late-night strategy sessions, drinking champagne from a mug because she said glasses were too obvious. She had liked Ethan's office. She had liked the height of it, the way the city appeared conquered below. Once, she had pressed herself against the window and said, Imagine being married to a man who owns this view. Ethan had not corrected her. He had liked the sound of it too much. An auditor removed a framed photo from his shelf. It was not of Celeste. There had never been a photo of Celeste in his office. This one showed Ethan shaking hands with the Prime Minister at a trade summit. Another showed him on a magazine cover beneath the headline, "The Man Who Made AUION Fearless." Fearless. He almost laughed. His phone buzzed again, but the screen displayed only limited emergency access now. His bank app had logged him out. His company messaging account had vanished. News alerts began forming, vague at first. Orion International announces immediate leadership transition. Internal review underway. CEO Ethan Vale removed pending investigation. Removed. Not resigned, not stepping down, removed. Marissa read over his shoulder and whispered, "This will ruin me." Ethan turned on her, "You." Her face hardened, tears vanished as quickly as they had come. "Yes, me, I had a life before you. You had a rented apartment and a fake waitlist for fake clients. And you had nothing before Celeste, apparently." The words hit exactly where she meant them to. For years Ethan had told himself his rise was pure will. Yes, doors opened. Yes, scholarships appeared. Yes, a mysterious recommendation had landed him an interview at Orion when applicants with better schools were rejected. Yes, Chairman Morland had taken interest in him early. But Ethan had explained those things as destiny. Ambition loves coincidence when coincidence flatters it. He remembered Celeste at their tiny first apartment, sitting cross-legged on the floor with financial reports spread around her. He had laughed when he saw her marking margins. "Careful," he'd teased, "you'll hurt yourself with all those numbers." She had smiled, "I like patterns. You like everything quiet. Quiet things still move." He had kissed her forehead and taken the papers away because he assumed she was trying to participate in a world she could not understand. Months later, during a presentation that nearly secured his first promotion, Ethan had used a strategic insight Celeste mentioned over dinner. She had said Orion's southeast expansion looked strong, but was exposed through shipping dependencies. He had repeated it in cleaner language, added charts, and watched executives lean forward. Afterward, Helena Croft had told him that was unusually perceptive. Ethan had accepted the praise without mentioning his wife. Why would he? Celeste had only been thinking aloud. Now, standing in his stripped office, he wondered how many of his greatest thoughts had first been spoken softly across a kitchen table by a woman he had dismissed as ordinary. The door opened. Orion's general counsel, Naomi Say, entered with 2 documents. Naomi was small, severe, and known throughout the company as the locked door because nothing passed her without permission. Ethan had admired her once. She handed him the first document, Notice of Removal. He did not take it. She placed it on the desk anyway and handed the second to Marissa. Marissa recoiled. "What is that?" "Notice of Contract Suspension and Audit Hold." "I'm not an employee. You are a vendor who billed $6.8 million to Orion subsidiaries while maintaining an undisclosed personal relationship with the approving executive." Marissa's face drained. That money was for brand transformation. Naomi looked at the empty champagne mug on the shelf, then back at her. "The audit will determine that." Ethan found his voice. "Naomi, we can settle this." "We are settling it. Privately." "It was private," Naomi said, "until you brought your mistress to a boardroom, signed legal documents in front of cameras, and allowed her to insult the beneficial owner's child." Beneficial owner. Ethan's knees felt suddenly unreliable. "Celeste owns it?" he asked. Naomi's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You truly didn't know?" The absence of mockery made it worse. "How much?" Marissa whispered. No one answered her. But Ethan saw the answer in Naomi's silence. Not shares, not a trust fund, not a symbolic title hidden in family paperwork. Celeste owned enough that the room had obeyed her with a whisper. That night, Ethan was driven not to the penthouse he considered home, but to a serviced apartment owned by one of his few personal accounts not yet frozen. The penthouse overlooking the river had been an executive residence attached to his position. He had decorated it with black marble, steel sculptures, and furniture Celeste said looked too uncomfortable for humans. He had ignored her and hired Marissa's designer. Now even the clothes in its closets had to be sorted by corporate counsel, because the invoices were tangled with relocation allowances and discretionary funds. The apartment smelled of dust and lemon cleaner. It had beige curtains, a low bed, and a view of the alley behind a restaurant. Marissa stood in the center of the room as if she had been dropped into exile. "I'm not staying here," she said. Ethan loosened his tie, then leave. "With what money?" He did not answer. She turned, eyes glittering. "You need to call someone, investors, friends, the minister, that man from the Dubai fund. They're not taking my calls." "You don't know that." He held up his phone, 14 missed attempts, no answer. Marissa folded her arms, "Cowards." Ethan almost agreed, but the word caught in his throat. They were not cowards, they were calculators. He knew because he had been one of them. Power attracted loyalty the way sugar attracted ants. Remove the sugar and the ants vanished. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his face in his hands. For the first time all day, no one was watching him. A memory rose without permission. Celeste on their wedding day, standing beneath an arch of white jasmine in a garden behind a chapel Ethan had complained was too simple. He had wanted a luxury hotel, but Celeste said she preferred somewhere that smelled alive. Her dress had been plain satin, no diamonds, no designer spectacle. He had thought she chose simplicity because she could not afford anything else. During the vows, his voice had broken. He had hated that. Celeste had squeezed his hands and whispered, "You don't have to perform with me." He had loved her then. He knew that now, and the knowledge was unbearable because it meant he could not rewrite everything as manipulation. There had been a time when he loved her laugh, her stillness, the way she made cheap soup taste like home because she toasted the bread with garlic. There had been a time when he rushed back from work just to tell her good news. There had been a time when ambition was something he brought home to share, not something he used as a door to lock her out. Marissa's voice cut through the memory. "She planned this." Ethan looked up. "She sat there with that baby and planned to ruin us," Marissa said. "Don't make her into a saint." "She didn't make you say what you said." Marissa flushed. "I was angry. You mocked my son." The words surprised them both. For 5 days, Ethan had avoided saying "my son." He had used phrases like "the baby" and "the situation." But now, in the stale apartment, stripped of title and audience, the truth had slipped out. Marissa heard it too. Her expression turned ugly. "Oh, now he's your son." Ethan stood, "Careful." She laughed. "Careful of what? You have nothing left." And there it was. The sentence he had feared his entire life. Not from enemies, not from the board, from the woman he had chosen over the wife who knew him when he actually had nothing and loved him anyway. He slept on the sofa that night. Or tried to. Sleep came in broken, punishing fragments. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Celeste smile after signing, calm, almost sorrowful. He saw Lysander rising. He heard the applause turning inside out. He heard Marissa's voice calling his newborn son a burden. Near dawn, he opened his phone and searched old photos. There were thousands of images from conferences, private jets, investor dinners, magazine shoots, hotel suites. Marissa appeared in many of the recent ones, sometimes accidentally reflected in mirrors, sometimes openly leaning into the frame after Ethan stopped caring who guessed. Celeste appeared rarely. One photo from 5 years ago stopped him. She was asleep at their old kitchen table, cheek resting on folded arms, one hand still curled around a red pen. Beside her was a stack of papers Ethan recognized with a sensation like cold water down his spine. Orion expansion models. His expansion models. Except in the photo, the margins were filled with Celeste's handwriting. He zoomed in, heart pounding. Avoid over-leveraging port assets. Ask why Westbridge supplier rates are artificially low. Human cost will become reputational cost within 3 years. Ethan stared at the final note. Human cost. Celeste had always seen people inside numbers. Ethan had seen numbers inside people. At 7 in the morning, he received an email from an address he did not recognize because his company account was gone. It contained one line and an attachment. From Naomi Say. You are required to appear for deposition at 10:00 a.m. The attachment was 184 pages. Marissa refused to go with him at first. Then her own notice arrived. By 9:30, they were in a private legal office 3 blocks from Orion, both wearing yesterday's clothes, both photographed by paparazzi someone had somehow alerted. Ethan suspected Marissa had called them before the engagement party to capture her triumph. Now they captured her, hiding her face. The deposition room was small and brutally bright. Naomi sat on one side with 3 attorneys. Ethan sat opposite with a lawyer he barely knew because his usual personal counsel had a conflict. Orion paid his firm. Marissa was placed in a separate room. Naomi began with simple questions. State your name. State your former title. Confirm your signature. Confirm your understanding of the Executive Morality Agreement dated June 14, 7 years prior. Ethan answered through clenched teeth. Then Naomi placed a document in front of him. Do you recognize this? He looked down. It was the original morality clause proposal. His name sat at the bottom, bold and confident. 7 years earlier, Orion had survived a scandal involving a regional director who used company money to fund a secret second life. The board had wanted a standard ethics update. Ethan, then hungry for influence, had written something much sharper. We must protect Orion from leaders whose private betrayals create public liabilities, he had declared in the meeting. Celeste had been at home that night, making soup. He remembered telling her about it proudly. Private betrayals, she had asked, stirring the pot. Executives are symbols. If they can lie to their families, they can lie to shareholders. Celeste had gone quiet. What? He asked. She turned down the flame. Just be careful building traps. Good traps don't care who steps into them. He had laughed and kissed her cheek. Then I won't step into one. Naomi's voice returned him to the deposition. Did you say during that meeting that a leader who humiliates a spouse in connection with company interests demonstrates unfitness to lead? Ethan's lawyer shifted. Context. Yes, Ethan said. Naomi slid another page forward. Did you personally request that the clause include forfeiture of residence benefits, unvested equity, and discretionary protections? His throat tightened. Yes. Did you enforce this clause against Daniel Reyes in 2021? Yes. Against Priya Mandan in 2022? Yes. Against Gregory Shaw in 2024? Ethan looked away. Yes. Naomi paused. Then she asked, did you believe the clause should not apply to you? Silence. That question did not need a legal answer. It had followed him his entire life. Different rules for those high enough to write them. By noon, the deposition had become a map of Ethan's arrogance. Emails, travel records, hotel bookings, Marissa's invoices, calendar gaps during Celeste's pregnancy. A message Ethan sent Marissa after missing a prenatal appointment. Don't worry, C will forgive me. She always does. Naomi read it aloud. Ethan shut his eyes. When they brought him a printed copy of Marissa's deposition excerpts, his hands were stiff with dread. Marissa had already started protecting herself. Mr. Vale assured me his marriage was effectively over. Mr. Vale told me Celeste was unstable after pregnancy. Mr. Vale directed billing classification. Mr. Vale said the chairman approved everything. He stopped reading. His lawyer leaned close. She's separating her liability from yours. Ethan almost laughed. She's lying. She's surviving. There was a difference, apparently. Across the city, Celeste sat in her father's house with Noah asleep beside her and watched the rain begin. Lysander's home was not as large as people imagined. The main estate outside the city was enormous, yes, with gates and gardens and a staff that moved like ghosts, but the townhouse where he actually lived was narrow, old, and lined with books. Evelyn had chosen it because she said large houses encouraged loneliness to spread out. Celeste had moved there after the hospital because the penthouse held too many shadows. Her own marital home had become evidence. The nursery she painted pale green was being photographed by auditors because Ethan had used company contractors to renovate it, then submitted half the work under executive wellness improvements. Even the crib had a file number now. That hurt more than Celeste expected. She had chosen the crib herself from a small craftsman, running her fingers over the smooth wood while Ethan texted across the room. She had imagined him standing beside it at night, one hand on their son's back, finally softened by fatherhood. She had held onto that image through missed dinners and perfume traces and messages Ethan tilted away from her. Hope, she had learned, did not always die from one blow. Sometimes it died from 1,000 explanations you forced yourself to believe. He is tired. He is stressed. He is afraid of becoming a father. He loves me badly, but he loves me. Then came the hospital. Noah had arrived after a long labor that made time dissolve. Celeste remembered gripping the rails, hearing nurses speak, seeing her father's pale face near the doorway because Lysander Morland, feared by governments, had no idea what to do with his daughter in pain. "Where is Ethan?" she had asked once. "On his way," her father said. He was not. When Ethan finally entered, Noah was already in her arms. Ethan looked at the child with something like astonishment, then fear, then inconvenience. He kissed Celeste's forehead too quickly. "Beautiful," he said. His phone buzzed. Celeste smelled Marissa before she saw the message preview on his screen. Later, when the nurse left and Noah slept against her, Ethan placed the envelope on the bedside table. "I didn't want to do this here," he said, which was the first lie because no one forced him. Celeste stared at the envelope. Divorce agreement. Her body was torn with exhaustion. Her son was less than a day old. Her husband stood beside the bed, wearing the expression he used before firing people. "There's someone else," she said. He looked relieved that she had made it easier. "Yes. Marissa." He did not deny it. "Do you love her?" Ethan glanced toward the window. "She understands the life I'm building." Celeste almost asked, "And what life did you think I was building with you?" Instead, she opened the envelope. The top pages were standard, brutal but standard. Ethan had been generous in the way rich men were generous when they wanted to feel clean. A settlement, a private arrangement, custody terms written as if Noah were a calendar inconvenience. Then Celeste saw the attachment. The morality cross-reference. For a moment she thought it was an accident. Then she saw Ethan's signature already placed on the executive declaration, confirming that no coercion, concealment, or reputational harm had influenced his decision. He had signed first, confident, careless, so certain she would be the only one bound by paper. Celeste's fingers trembled. Not from fear. From the terrible arrival of choice. She could warn him. She could say, "Ethan, do you understand what you included?" She could still protect him from himself, as she had done quietly for years, fixing his numbers, softening his speeches, reminding him of birthdays he forgot, sending anonymous apologies to employees he cut with words during bad weeks. She could be the woman who saved him again and received nothing but resentment for it. Noah made a tiny sound in her arms. Celeste looked at her son and understood that mercy given to the unrepentant becomes inheritance for the innocent to suffer. So she signed. When Ethan left the hospital, Celeste called her father. Lysander answered on the first ring. "Celeste." "He signed it," she said. There was a long silence. Then her father said, "Are you sure?" She looked at Noah. "No, but I'm done being unsure for his benefit." Now, sitting in the townhouse, while rain scratched the windows, Celeste felt the weight of that decision settle into her bones. Her father entered quietly. "Naomi says the depositions are proceeding." Celeste nodded. "You don't have to attend tomorrow." "Yes, I do. You gave birth 6 days ago and became chairwoman yesterday." Lysander frowned. "Acting chairwoman." She looked up. "No." For the first time that day, he seemed startled. Celeste adjusted Noah's blanket. "You always said ownership is not leadership. I understand that now. I hid because I wanted to be loved without being measured, but hiding did not protect me. It only allowed others to mistake silence for emptiness." Lysander sat across from her. "You want Orion's." "I already have Orion." Her voice was gentle but steady. "Now I want to lead it." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. For years, Lysander had prepared for this moment in secret, though not this way. He had built training around Celeste's life without calling it training. The family office summaries he sent her were ownership briefings. The charity budgets she managed were operational tests. The quiet meetings with factory workers, shipping managers, hospital administrators, and union representatives were a map of Orion's human consequences. Celeste thought she had been living outside the empire. In truth, her father had been teaching her to see the parts CEOs usually ignored. The next morning, she entered Orion Tower through the front doors. Not the private garage, not the family elevator, the front. Every camera in the lobby turned. Employees slowed. Security guards straightened. A receptionist who had once told Celeste that spouses needed visitor badges went pale when the head of security stepped forward and said, "Madam Morland." Celeste stopped. "Vale," she corrected. The name tasted complicated, but it was Noah's name too. She would not abandon it just because Ethan had damaged it. "Mrs. Vale," the guard said. Celeste continued walking. She wore navy, not black. Her hair was loose. Noah remained at home with his nurse and Lysander, though leaving him even for a few hours felt like walking without a heartbeat. Her body still hurt. Her hands were cold, but each step through the lobby stitched something inside her back together. Whispers followed. "That's her. The wife. Morland's daughter. She owns the company." Celeste heard all of it. She had spent a lifetime hearing whispers. The difference was that now she let them hear her footsteps. In the executive conference room, the board rose when she entered. Ethan was already there with his lawyer. He looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight. His jaw was unshaven, his tie slightly crooked. The sight struck Celeste unexpectedly. Ethan had always been immaculate in public. Even during illness, grief, exhaustion, he dressed like armor could be tailored. Now the armor had gaps. Marissa sat several chairs away from him, flanked by her own attorney. She did not look at Celeste. Naomi began the hearing. It was not a court trial yet, though civil and criminal referrals waited outside like storms. This was the corporate review required before final forfeiture. The board would hear evidence. Ethan would respond. Marissa's contracts would be examined. The trust clause would be activated or limited. Celeste sat at the head of the table because Lysander refused the chair. Ethan noticed. His eyes flickered to the empty seat where her father should have been, then to her. Something like disbelief crossed his face. She remembered another table, years ago, in their first apartment. Ethan had sat across from her with takeout noodles and a cheap laptop, practicing answers for his Orion interview. "What if they ask where I see myself in 10 years?" he said. "Tell the truth," Celeste answered. "The truth is CAO. Then say you want responsibility equal to your ambition." He stared at her. "That's good. You sound surprised." "I am." She had thrown a noodle at him. He had laughed and caught her wrist, kissing soy sauce from her knuckle. They were poor then, or he believed they were. The radiator hissed too loudly. Rain came through one corner of the window. Ethan had looked around the little kitchen and said, "One day, I'll put you somewhere better than this." Celeste had answered, "I'm not waiting for better, I'm here." He had not understood that she meant it as devotion. He had heard it as smallness. Naomi's voice filled the conference room. "We will enter into record the hospital service timestamp, the divorce agreement, the executive declaration, the West invoices, the boardroom recording, and witness statements from 11 attendees." Marissa's attorney objected to the boardroom recording. Naomi replied, "Ms. West invited media documentation for what she believed was an engagement announcement. Consent was signed." Marissa's face turned crimson. Celeste looked at her then. Marissa West had not always been cruel in obvious ways. The first time Celeste met her, Marissa had smiled too brightly and complimented her dress in the tone of someone praising a child's drawing. It was at an Orion charity dinner where Ethan left Celeste near the dessert table while he worked the room. Celeste had been 6 months pregnant, tired, and quietly amused by how many people mistook her for a guest's assistant. Marissa approached with champagne. "You're Ethan's wife," she said, as if discovering a minor footnote. "Yes. He's extraordinary. I know. Men like him need someone who can keep up." Celeste had placed a hand on her stomach. Keeping up is not always the same as walking beside someone. Marissa's eyes dropped to the wedding ring Ethan had bought before wealth transformed his taste. It was modest, almost plain. "That's sweet." Sweet. The word had been a knife wrapped in sugar. A week later, Ethan suggested Celeste skip the next gala because she looked tired. She did not argue. By then, she had learned that when a man started hiding you under the language of concern, he was often making room for someone else. At the hearing, Naomi played the boardroom footage. Celeste watched herself on the screen, pale, still, holding Noah. She watched Ethan sign. She watched Marissa laugh. Even knowing what came next, the insult landed again. At least Ethan won't have to raise that little burden anymore. The room froze in the recording, just as it had in life. Present-day Marissa looked down. Ethan did not. He watched the screen as if seeing the moment for the first time. Perhaps he was. Narcissism had a strange effect on memory. It blurred other people's pain until consequences sharpened the image. Naomi stopped the video. "Mr. Vale," she said, "do you dispute that Ms. West made this statement?" Ethan's jaw worked. "No." "Did you correct her?" He closed his eyes. "No." "Did you defend your child?" No answer. Celeste looked away first. That more than the affair, more than the divorce, more than the public humiliation, had sealed something inside her. Ethan could claim confusion about love. He could claim weakness, ego, temptation, fear. But a father who heard his newborn called a burden and remained silent had revealed a poverty no fortune could repair. Marissa's attorney tried to argue that the statement, while regrettable, did not prove financial misconduct. Naomi let him speak. Then she opened the invoices. Brand alignment retreat, Santorini. Executive positioning intensive, Maldives. Confidential stakeholder dinner, Paris. Narrative architecture consultation, Milan. Each trip aligned with dates Ethan claimed to be away for acquisitions, regulatory meetings, or investor diplomacy. Some had business components buried inside them, like coins tossed into fountains. Most did not. Then came the apartment. Orion had leased a luxury residence under a subsidiary for temporary consultant housing. Marissa had lived there for 11 months. Celeste remembered the address. Ethan had once sent her flowers from a shop on the same street after missing her birthday dinner. The card said, "Busy building our future, forgive me." She had kept the flowers alive for 9 days. Ethan's lawyer shifted strategies by afternoon. "My client acknowledges personal failure," he said, "but this proceeding risks appearing retaliatory due to Mrs. Vale's personal relationship to the matter." Celeste finally spoke. "Mr. Arden, are you suggesting the clause should apply only when the betrayed spouse lacks voting control?" The lawyer hesitated. "I'm suggesting impartiality requires distance." "Impartiality required disclosure," Celeste said. "Your client did not disclose, Ms. West did not disclose, the board did not know, shareholders did not know, I did not know the extent of corporate misuse until the audit began. Distance is not the issue, concealment is." Ethan stared at her. She felt his surprise like heat. How many times had he mistaken her silence for ignorance? How many times had he simplified business stories at dinner, leaving out details because he assumed she would not follow? How many times had she let him, because correcting him seemed less important than loving him? Love had made her patient. It had also made him careless. By evening, the board voted unanimously to uphold Ethan's removal and activate forfeiture pending court confirmation. Marissa's contracts were terminated. The audit file would be referred externally. The press statement would remain controlled but clear. Ethan stood as everyone began to leave. "Celeste." She gathered her papers slowly. "Please," he said. That word from Ethan made several directors glance over. He walked toward her, stopping only when security shifted. "I didn't know," he said. Celeste looked at him. "You didn't know what?" "About you, about the company, about your father." "I know. If I had known." Finish that sentence carefully. He stopped, because they both heard it. "If I had known you were powerful, I would have treated you better." That was not love, that was strategy. His face crumpled, not dramatically, not beautifully, but like a man watching a mirror crack. "I loved you," he whispered. Celeste's throat tightened despite herself. "I know." His eyes lifted. "That's the tragedy," she said. "You loved me when I was useful to your wounded parts. Then you punished me for not feeding the monstrous ones." Ethan flinched. Marissa, already near the door, made a small scoffing sound. Celeste turned to her. For the first time, Marissa looked frightened. Celeste did not raise her voice. "You thought cruelty made you superior because you mistook kindness for weakness. That is a common mistake. It is also an expensive one." Marissa's lips trembled. "I said I was sorry." "No," Celeste said. "You said you were angry. That is not the same thing." Then she left. The legal trial began 6 weeks later. By then, the world knew enough to feast on fragments. Headlines called it the billion-dollar divorce trap, though the numbers were larger and the truth more complicated. Commentators debated morality clauses. Business channels replayed footage of Ethan entering court with hollow cheeks. Lifestyle blogs dissected Marissa's fall from glamorous strategist to disgraced consultant. Anonymous employees wrote posts about Ethan's temper, his brilliance, his impossible standards, his habit of taking credit for ideas from people too junior to protest. Celeste refused all interviews. Instead, she worked. Motherhood and leadership collided without mercy. She reviewed audit summaries while Noah slept against her shoulder. She signed restructuring plans with a baby monitor beside her laptop. She pumped milk between board calls and once joined a legal briefing with a burp cloth accidentally draped over her blazer. No one dared mention it. Lysander watched with a tenderness he tried to disguise as supervision. "You can delegate more," he told her one night. "I am delegating. You reviewed port safety reports at 2 in the morning." Noah was awake. "That is not delegation, that is multitasking under duress." Celeste smiled faintly. "Did Mother ever win arguments with you?" "Constantly." "How?" She smiled like that. For a moment, Evelyn was in the room with them. Celeste looked back at the report. Orion was not innocent just because Ethan had fallen. That was the part the public story missed. Companies did not become cruel because one man failed. Cruel systems welcomed failing men and gave them corner offices. She found delayed worker injury claims in a shipping subsidiary, suppressed complaints in a manufacturing arm, executive bonuses tied to savings that came from understaffed safety teams. Ethan had not created all of it. He had accelerated it because numbers praised him and people bored him. Celeste began reversing policies before the court confirmed anything. Directors warned her to move slowly. She refused. "You cannot claim moral leadership only when punishing scandal," she told the board. "If Orion is a family company, then everyone paid by it is inside the outer circle of that family. We will not protect my son's dignity while ignoring the dignity of workers who build his inheritance." Helena Croft watched her across the table with something like respect. "You sound like your mother," she said. Celeste answered, "Good." The trial's most devastating day came when Ethan took the stand. He wore a dark suit, simpler than usual, likely chosen by counsel to make him appear humbled. It almost worked until he started speaking. At first, he said the correct things. He regretted the affair. He regretted hurting Celeste. He regretted the public nature of the incident. He regretted the financial confusion around Marissa's contracts. Naomi stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Vale, you used the phrase financial confusion. Do you mean fraud?" "No." "Do you mean concealment?" "I mean classification errors." Naomi nodded slightly. "Who classified Ms. West's Maldives trip as an investor relations retreat?" Ethan hesitated. "My office." "Your assistant." "My office acted under my authority." "Who attended from investor relations?" Silence. Naomi waited. "No one," Ethan said. "Who attended from Orion besides you?" "No one." "Who attended besides Ms. West?" His jaw tightened. "No one." Naomi moved on. "Did your wife know you were in the Maldives with Ms. West?" "No." "What did you tell her?" "That I was in Singapore." "Did she question you?" "No." "Why not?" Ethan looked toward Celeste. She sat behind Naomi, hands folded. Noah was not in court. She had refused to make him part of the spectacle. Still, Ethan looked at the empty space near her as if the child's absence accused him. "She trusted me," he said. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear a page turn. Naomi softened her voice, which somehow made it sharper. "Did you rely on that trust to deceive her?" Ethan's lawyer objected. The judge allowed the question. Ethan swallowed. "Yes." Marissa testified 2 days later and destroyed herself trying to destroy Ethan. She claimed Ethan manipulated her, then admitted she had researched Celeste's background but found nothing useful. She claimed the insulting comment about Noah was taken out of context, then the footage was played again. She claimed her invoices reflected real work, then failed to explain why one stakeholder dinner receipt included only 2 meals, 1 hotel suite, and a couple's spa package. At one point, Naomi asked, "Did you believe Celeste Vale was beneath Mr. Vale?" Marissa lifted her chin. "At the time, yes." "Why?" "She had no ambition." Celeste almost laughed. "No ambition." She thought of her mother teaching her to sit quietly in negotiation rooms and listen for what men feared. She thought of Lysander handing her balance sheets at 17 while other girls received cars. She thought of hiding her name not because she lacked ambition, but because she wanted the rarest luxury in the world, to be known without being priced. Naomi asked, "Do you still believe that?" Marissa looked at Celeste. "No," she said. It was the first honest answer she had given. Court confirmed Ethan's forfeiture 3 weeks later. Some matters continued into separate proceedings, settlements and penalties, but the central collapse was complete. Ethan lost the executive residence, unvested shares, bonus rights, certain properties tied to company benefit structures, and protection from multiple civil claims. Marissa was ordered to repay portions of improperly billed funds and barred from contracting with Orient entities. Their names became warnings in compliance seminars. But punishment did not feel like victory. Celeste discovered this the morning after the ruling when she woke to Noah's soft fussing and felt no triumph, only exhaustion. Sunlight lay across the nursery floor. The crib from the old penthouse had been returned after review, cleared of legal entanglement like an object rescued from a shipwreck. She stood beside it and watched Noah stretch one tiny fist into the air, demanding a world he did not yet understand. She lifted him gently. "Your father loved applause," she whispered. "I hope you love truth more." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Please let me see him." "Ethan." Celeste stared at the screen for a long time. Custody had been addressed through lawyers, supervised visitation, limited until further review. Ethan had not attended the first scheduled session, then the second. Pride, perhaps, shame, legal advice, she did not know. Now he was asking directly. A year ago she would have answered immediately, explained, comforted, made it easier for him to do the right thing. Now she forwarded the message to her attorney and set the phone down. Boundaries felt cruel only to those who benefited from their absence. 2 months later, Ethan saw his son for the first time in a supervised family center with beige walls and plastic toys. Celeste brought Noah herself. Ethan stood when she entered. He looked thinner, quieter, dressed in a sweater instead of a suit. Without the architecture of power around him, he seemed almost like the man from the library again, hungry, uncertain, proud in ruins. Noah blinked at him with Celeste's gray eyes. Ethan's mouth trembled. "He's bigger," he said. "Barbies do that." The supervisor explained the rules. Ethan listened carefully, nodding too much. When Celeste placed Noah on the play mat, Ethan knelt, as if approaching something sacred and dangerous. He did not reach immediately. That surprised her. "Hi," he whispered. "I'm Ethan." "Not Dad." "Ethan." Celeste felt a small, unexpected ache. Noah grabbed a fabric block and shoved it toward his mouth. Ethan laughed softly, and the sound broke halfway through. "I'm sorry," he said without looking at Celeste. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," she said, "it doesn't. I'm not asking you to forgive me." "Good." He nodded as if he deserved that. For 20 minutes, he sat on the floor while Noah ignored him, then studied him, then accidentally dropped a toy into his lap. Ethan picked it up and returned it with both hands. Celeste watched through the glass from the adjoining room after the first few minutes. She did not confuse this with redemption. Men could weep over consequences and still avoid accountability. But Noah deserved a father who tried under rules, not one erased because pain made erasure tempting. Lysander disapproved when she told him. "He abandoned you." "Yes." "He failed the child." "Yes." And yet Noah is not a trophy in Ethan's punishment. Her father was silent. Then he said, "Your mother would have said that." Celeste smiled sadly. "I know." A year passed. Orient changed in ways skeptics said were impossible. Celeste sold non-essential luxury assets and redirected funds into worker safety, parental leave, and transparent executive oversight. She capped certain bonuses until injury claims dropped. Investors complained, then quieted when long-term stability improved. Employees who had feared her as a hidden heiress began calling her Mrs. Vale with warmth instead of shock. She kept the name. Not for Ethan. For Noah and for the version of herself who had loved sincerely. She refused to let betrayal own every symbol it touched. Marissa disappeared from the city after bankruptcy proceedings and a final settlement. Rumor placed her in Monaco, then Miami, then nowhere anyone could confirm. Celeste did not follow the rumors. Marissa had been a blade, but Ethan had been the hand that chose to wield it. Ethan rebuilt slowly, though never again at the height he craved. No major corporation would touch him. He consulted under strict oversight for smaller firms, paid support, attended supervised visits, then earned longer ones through consistency. He never regained Celeste's trust. He did not ask for her love. That, perhaps, was the first sign he had begun to understand the size of what he had destroyed. On Noah's first birthday, Celeste held a small party in Lysander's garden. There were no press cameras, no billionaires unless one counted her father, who wore a paper hat because Noah had slapped it onto his head with frosting-covered hands. Helena Croft came with a wooden train. Naomi Say brought a stack of children's books about stubborn animals. The nurse who had held Noah in the boardroom cried when he took 3 wobbly steps towards Celeste and collapsed laughing into her skirt. Late in the afternoon, as guests wandered among the flowers, Celeste found her father standing near the old fountain. "You built something better from it," Lysander said. She followed his gaze to Noah, who was trying to feed cake to the wooden train. "I'm building," she said. "Better takes time." He nodded. After a while, he reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. Celeste frowned. "What is that?" "Your mother's ring." Her breath caught. Inside lay a simple sapphire ring Evelyn had worn every day, not the grand diamonds people expected from Lysander Morland's wife. Celeste remembered twisting it around her mother's finger during long car rides, watching blue light move inside the stone. "She wanted you to have it when you stopped hiding," Lysander said. Celeste touched the sapphire. "I don't think she meant after a scandal. She knew life, she did not specify elegance." Celeste laughed, and tears came with it. Her father looked uncomfortable, which made her laugh harder. That evening, after everyone left and Noah slept upstairs, Celeste stood alone in the garden with the ring on her finger. The sky had turned violet. The fountain whispered. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city moved around Orient Tower, around court records, around gossip that had already begun to fade into newer scandals. Her life had once narrowed to Ethan's approval without her noticing. She had mistaken endurance for devotion, silence for grace, forgiveness for strength. But love, real love, she understood now, did not require a woman to shrink so a man could feel large. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Happy birthday to Noah. Thank you for letting me see him yesterday. I know I have no right to ask for anything more. I'm just grateful." Celeste read it twice. Then she typed, "I hope you become someone he can know safely." She sent it before she could soften it. A few seconds later, Ethan replied. "May 2. Celeste slipped the phone into her pocket and looked up at the house, where her son slept beneath a roof no one could take from him. The world had called her quiet. Ethan had called her ordinary. Marissa had called her weak. But the truth had been waiting patiently beneath all those names. Celeste Vale had never been powerless. She had only been merciful. And when mercy finally ended, even an empire had bowed.